The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, and welcome to everyone joining us for today's Interact with Interaction webinar featuring our guest speakers, Scott Winter, Head of Product Management for Interaction, and Maggie Hepburn, Interaction Learning Experience Principal. This month's webinar is GDPR, Defending Your Data. My name is Dave, and I'm a Marketing Associate with LexisNexis. I will be your host for today's session. Interact with Interaction webinars are complementary to our customers and have been designed to help you get the most from your software by providing you with industry knowledge plus time-saving tips and best practices for using Interaction. The format for today's webinar is the presentation provided by Scott and Maggie, followed by a question and answer period. All of our attendees will be in listen-only mode for the duration of our presentation. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask them via the questions pane located on your webinar control panel. During the last 15 minutes of the webinar, Scott and Maggie will answer your questions. Please note that we are recording today's event, and all attendees will receive an email within 1 week with a link to the recording and slides. Also, there is a brief survey at the end of our webinar today that we ask you to please take a moment to complete. Your feedback will help us in planning our future events. Scott and Maggie, at this time, I will turn the webinar over to you.
All right, thanks, Dave. Hello, everyone, and thanks again for joining us today, and again, your time here in the new year as we get ready for GDPR. So in the last webinar, I think a big takeaway I had was just kind of a brief introduction, a little bit more to GDPR in the beginning of the session. So GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation out of the EU, is this new regulation that is coming into play or effect on May 25th this year. So really it's impacting anybody that has a citizen of the EU in one of their databases, or that you're storing, you have the citizen's information. And so now as you think of citizens from the EU, this regulation now is around getting consent to store their data, what type of data that you're storing. So what is the personal information, which is, name, date, and even goes down to IP addresses. So definitely some things to think about there. And so now how we get the consent and how we process this information and who your controllers are, there's a lot of information about this that you're going to find out there in different articles. It definitely requires your teams to interpret what this regulation is. So there are some broad things, and there's the stuff that's giving everyone headaches as they think about it. But the interpretations are needed by your staff to understand, how you want to execute and what's going to keep you in compliance. So once you have those interpretations, then you come up with, again, what you need to execute to be compliant. And then once you have those strategies, that's where our services team, what Interaction does today, can be configured in ways to help you execute those plans. And so today we'll be talking about defending the data, which Maggie is going to get into just ways that you can think about having your data in the best state that you can be working on, starting now in the new year. And then as this release comes out, again, targeted for March 30th, then you'll have some new tools to help execute these strategies. Then I'm going to be talking about some extended searches that we're going to be offering. So there's code changes that are going into this release on March 30th, but there's also some stuff that we're working on around reports and extended searches. And extended searches are basically ways that we can take SQL and you can run these searches within the Windows client. But it's going to be ways that you can also look through your data and find things today. So we're going to be providing those to you as soon as we're finished with them. Some of these are targeted as early as January 30th. And then the last thing we'll be covering today is destroying data. And I'll explain a little bit more of that when we get to that piece. But to start off, I'm going to go ahead and pass to Maggie, who will talk about detecting your data. Go ahead, Maggie. And Maggie, you might be on
Thanks,
mute.
Scott. And hey, everybody. Again, I'm so glad you could be here today, too. I don't know about you, but when I first heard about... No, can you hear me?
Yeah, hey Maggie, you're going in and out.
Can you hear me okay?
You're calling in through your computer. You're kind of going in and out. So I guess try one more time, and if not, you might want to flip to your cell phone. Not really. I would switch to another phone. Okay, so while Maggie is switching to another phone, you gotta love technology. Just like new demos when I do
Can you
the
hear?
prospects, you know.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, you're good.
Okay, sorry about that, gang. Thank you. All right. So I don't know about you guys, but when I first heard about this GDPR thing, I thought, okay, I'm an action girl. I need to know what to do. Tell me what to do, what I can start doing, how I can get myself in a position to start complying with this rule. Now, as you well know, not a lot of it's been fully defined yet, so there may not be a lot. I don't even know a lot about it yet, truly. But what can I start doing today? So when it comes time to start complying with however your firm is going to interpret this, generally when it comes time to start, let's call it identifying and forgetting contacts who wish to be forgotten, you're going to hear a lot about that. You're going to want to be organized and ready to comply in whatever way and through whatever processes you've set up. Now, like Scott said, he's going to take you further into that in just a little bit, kind of the how around the things we're going to help provide for you. But again, what can you start doing today? So I tried to start thinking about, you know, what in our lives, what are some things in our lives that could maybe equate to this GDPR situation? And I remembered that one of my goals this year is to just become more organized at work. So if I may, let me show you my desk here. Okay, that's not really my desk, but it's pretty close, and I think you get the idea. I would not be surprised if some of your desks look this way too. So let me ask you this. Can you start a new approach to organization if you leave your desk looking like this? I don't know about you, but certainly not me. So I kind of need to be set up for success before I can implement any new process or procedure. I really need to get this thing tidied up. Now, for your firm's compliance with GDPR, again, whatever, you're going to want to have your data set up for success. So if we go back to my desk here, I don't know yet what kinds of folders or binders I may end up using, or maybe I'll find some cool tabs for my binders, or I'll start using OneNote more effectively. Maybe there'll be cute little bins in my desk drawers, right, that organize things. But I want you to kind of equate this to your data. Can you try to be GDPR compliant with your data starting out in a similar fashion here? Sure, you can try. Are you going to be successful? Maybe, but think about it. I mean, really, can a little purging, a little merging, a little organization increase your chances of successful compliance? Of course, of course. And gang, with GDPR, you must be successful. You have to be successful, or your firm, as you probably have heard, is going to pay a pretty high price. So let's talk about this. What's the first step to kind of getting situated and ready for this? What I would encourage you to do is walk with me here through identifying some potential data gaps that you can begin addressing. We don't have to know the regulation fully defined yet. Your firm doesn't have to be sure yet exactly what they're going to do, but you certainly can begin. So let's look at possible gap number one, company association. And by the way, if in this presentation it feels like a broken record when I'm always lecturing you on data quality, that's the situation. But let's talk about company association first. You need to know who your contacts are in relation to your firm, in relation to your clients specifically, your prospects, etc. Aside from it making it easier to find potential duplicates, which we'll talk about in a second, mostly this is about knowing maybe that it's the Bob Smith at Aetna that's going to want to be forgotten and not the Bob Smith at Merck, right? And with this, by ensuring company association, you're really doing two things here. If necessary, you're ensuring the right Bob is forgotten, but you're also still just generally in the normal scheme of your CRM, of your interaction system, you're taking advantage of the normal opportunities you have with all the other Bob Smiths, right? You know them from the others. So ensuring company association really helps you identify those contacts better. Plus, by associating, you're often also ensuring that a lot of those data fields are filled in too, right? When you associate, you get a lot of information from the companies, again, helping you determine kind of who's who and helping you identify those dupes. So possible solutions for gap number one. Well, first of all, I think a lot of you know, you can easily build a search, right, in your system out of the box for people with no company association. If you've taken any of my data steward classes, you've done that before. But I encourage you to take that further and maybe prioritize a little bit. So once you get those results, which ones actually have company names, right? That's going to be obviously a little easier to associate to a company. Which ones are known by people at your firm? So if you start to get into the area where you don't know the company name, you don't have anything else, does anyone know them? Maybe those folks can help out. What folders are those contacts in? That might give you a little insight into who they are. And by the way, if they're in marketing lists, maybe some sponsored lists, who sponsored them into those lists? There's always a breadcrumb trail at somewhere you can try to follow. And by the way, that last one, it may take a little longer to research, but is there even an email address on this contact, or maybe even a partial phone number, right? These are the types of things that can help you deduce who these contacts are if you have the time to dig that deeply. But you can see easily that there is a prioritization here. And by the way, have you also considered, you know, in terms of this effort, using your FDA rules, right? What if we find these contacts and maybe while they're, let's call it under investigation, we put them in folders, right? Isolate them for work. You could open that folder up to the front end, let your users browse through it. Remember, they can see their own contacts in the context of a folder from the front end. So get more help. Than it's not necessarily all on you, right? The firm needs to comply with these rules. So the more help you have, the better. Just a thought. Possible gap number two. Duplicates. You knew that one was coming. I tell you, even if we don't quite know fully what this rule is going to do and what we need to do, I can tell you, and I think you can guess this, it seems like GDPR certainly is going to mean in some fashion that we need to abide by the wishes of our contacts, right? So it's going to be so important that you really have only one version of all your contacts in the system. So in case they need to be forgotten, you can feel confident that the one Bob Smith again has been forgotten and there's not another one floating around out there. So possible solutions for this. Some basic stuff, and a lot of you probably do a little bit already. Remember up at the top of this slide here, you've got those 3 out-of-the-box searches that find potential duplicates. These 3, remember, are run more broadly against your firm list, but we recommend also that you not neglect the e-address and the phone number. A lot of people just run the potential duplicates by name, but those others can be so helpful. If someone's name changes, or if their employment changes, if there are lots of Bob Smiths and you can't tell them apart, sometimes those phones and e-addresses give you a little clue. So those can be quite helpful. Don't neglect those. You also may have the prioritized cleanup searches in your list. A lot of you know those as PDMQ searches, or prioritized duplicate management queries. Those searches are great. They go a little step further than the out-of-the-box potential dupes. They allow you to focus and as the name implies, prioritize your cleanup on potential dupes via, say, your client folder or your alumni folder. So you can drill down and focus on those that are most important to clean up. And it's not on the slide here. I'll just say it once, but don't forget your interaction IQ tool. I can find a lot of dupes on the way into your system. It's going to help you streamline and help minimize the amount of duplicate work you even need to worry about. So that's all on that. But of course, you're probably aware of the 2 options at the bottom here in terms of actually actioning these items, merging these dupes and merging multiple dupes together. So make sure that's part of your process. I'm sure that it is in general, but it's going to be even more so important now. Possible gap number 3. I'm calling this irrelevant contacts. And what we mean by that, you know, if you think about it, there's always some inherent risk here in keeping stuff around that doesn't have any value to you, right? Are there contacts in your system that just don't have any relevance to your business development efforts, to your business anymore? You know, first, these contacts, I mean, Lord, they could stumble into lists they don't belong into. That's not good. What about contacts with no company or no contact info? I mean, they're just ripe for wanting to be filled in with maybe something that's incorrect. Or what if they get segmented into folders incorrectly? I always feel like it's like putting random strangers in your distribution lists, right? Oh, I hope it's okay if they accidentally get sent something, right? If you just forget GDPR for a moment, that's just not good overall. So something that can help you kind of prepare for GDPR, at least indirectly, but by the way, on a side note, is also just great with helping you manage the overall quantity of things you even need to do, is kind of considering what we like to refer to as archivable contacts, right? For example, of all your contacts, how many aren't known by anybody at the firm? I would question, you know, if no one knows them, what are they doing in there? By the way, there's an out-of-the-box search for that. You know, maybe there are contacts that you haven't had activities with in ages, right? If we haven't done anything with them, if there's been no business development activity or no billing types of activities, those are often in other systems, but, you know, why are we hanging on to these people? And then contacts, for example, with no contact types. If you've got contacts in your database and you haven't segmented them in a businessy kind of way into your contact type folders, who are they? And granted, there may be some that are appropriate to have, but I would question. Oh, and by the way, not archiving contacts, you realize that means you're tending to things that don't matter, right? I think back to my desk. I'm sure there's lots of things on my desk that really just aren't relevant anymore that could be filed away. And that's probably one of the biggest parts of my organizational problem. You know how good it feels when you clear the clutter, right? I feel like right now I might be wasting time and space and maybe a little sanity by letting all that stuff kind of pile up and hang around that's of no current value to me. It's probably hiding things that are important. And the same would be true for your data. I mean, how many important contacts are being neglected because you're tending to things that really have no relevance, right? So let's talk about solutions for gap number 3. Now, I think finding archivable candidates, archivable contacts can actually be kind of fun. It really lets you get creative with some out-of-the-box thinking, especially if you're kind of a search nerd like me. I would encourage you to ask yourself, what is it about contacts in our system that makes them maybe not important to business development anymore? Now, I mentioned some of these earlier, but you'll notice I have a little screenshot there. There's an out-of-the-box search to find contacts who are not known by your current employees. Again, who are they? Why are they in there? Maybe, though, you build some of your own searches as well. Maybe looking for contacts with those, as we mentioned, no activities in a certain time frame or aren't in any contact type folders, or, you know, another one, even ones that are associated to former clients. What are their importance still to the firm? Should they be reassociated to another company? Should they go away? I mean, we could sit here and list a million of them, right? But it's all going to come down to what you have in your database and what you define as, let's say, irrelevant or archivable. So when it comes to actioning these contacts, our go-to recommendation generally is to create an archived people folder in your administrative folders and kind of tuck them away in there. And what you're really doing is you're copying them from the firm list, and you're what we call paste moving them into another folder. So in short, gang, what you're doing is you're unsourcing, you're moving from the firm list to another folder, you're resourcing them in a separate folder. So they're out of the mix, no one sees them, only you can see them on the back end, and, you know, work with them from there as necessary in the future. So hey, let's get that desk area looking awesome. You want to be in a good position to begin with, right? So you're in an even better position to comply with however GDPR comes down. Having a tidy data set is going to be your perfect first step. That's something you can do right now. However, gang, remember, all of these things I've gone over with you today, the company association, the duplicates, the irrelevant or archivable contacts, I think you all know well enough at this point that that should be a common part of your normal data quality process. But remember, these tasks that we're talking about, they're based on your own judgment around data quality and kind of whether contacts are clean or of business development relevance. GDPR and your firm's interpretation of that are going to define which contacts need to go further. That's the key here. Past just archiving them and be instead maybe completely forgotten, right? There's a step beyond everything we're talking about today. The challenge, of course, is, I think Scott mentioned this on the previous webinar, the challenge is kind of forgetting someone, but remembering them enough that you are supposed to forget them, right? So how do you do that without deleting things? And of course, here at Interaction, we want to make sure that we provide you with some functionality that will help you do some of those things. So for more on that, Scott, I'm going to turn it back over to you and let you introduce the group here to some really awesome things that are coming.
All right, thanks, Maggie. So first off, and this is kind of going to fit into the theme that Maggie's been talking about, defending your data quality. So we have some reports that we're writing through SSRS. So these are basically SQL reports. When we talk about SQL and even the PDMQ that Maggie brought up earlier, there's things that you can do in the front end through the Windows client and part of Interaction, but to really get into the SQL and advanced searches and things that we can't get from the front end, we can do it on the back end of the system. So the SSRS reports, when we build those, they can be viewed throughout the various interfaces of Interaction. And that SQL technology, or the searching that we're building for the reports, we're also going to put into some extended searches. So contacts with no relationships, contacts with one relationship. So again, Maggie's been talking about weeding out the data and the contacts that don't have a business relevance to be in our system, and something we need to look at. Contacts with no activities within a date range. So similar to thinking of a client, and maybe that client is not, people or companies are no longer clients if there's nothing billable within 3 or 4 years, whatever your firm policy is. You can kind of look at that here with no activities. Do they have business purpose if there's no activity within a certain time frame? And then contacts with missing address information, phone numbers, or email addresses. So this is huge with understanding who the contacts are, incomplete data. And when we get to the report, in advanced imports, there's some things that you can do from the reporting side, but the searches allow us to, like Maggie said, move people and companies into folders to do stuff with and to prioritize. Now, the last part of today is destroy, but almost, because if we destroy everything, we might forget that we were supposed to get rid of them. And so we're calling this suppression. And with suppression, this is really around the right to be forgotten. So I won't go and read the whole paragraph here, but similar to where you need to get consent to store the data, at any given point of time, these contacts can say, I want to be forgotten out of your system. I want my data to be deleted. And you need to comply with this. Now, it's going to be interesting, I think, when we actually get to May 25th. How often are we going to see this happen? Is this going to be, a couple a year, or is this going to be huge subsets? So I'm very interested to, just see what's going to take place as this regulation hits May 25th. But the right to be forgotten here is the main point. So if I delete you, how do I know not to let you back into the system? So I take my contact record, and I'm going to go through. I've said I want to be forgotten from your system, and we're going to go through the deletion process. Now I'm deleted, data's purged, and then somebody else in the LexisNexis organization here, Maggie, comes in, and we met at a conference, or we were talking somewhere, we're a new relationship, maybe I've known Maggie for years, whatever it could be. She comes into Interaction, and she starts to put a new contact record, which could be in the web client, it could be in IMO, maybe she's on the marketing side, so she's in the Windows client, and maybe she's just using Outlook, and Outlook Sync is picking up and now brings it into Interaction. So this is a problem because I asked to be forgotten, but now somebody's putting me back into the system. So one of the interpretations, and this is, some of these little bullets and definitions we're pulling up from different websites you can see below. but you can retain just enough information about the individual to ensure that the restriction is respected in the future. Now, how much information is that? You're going to see we have some configurations for you, and that's part of what you get to decide, and then also what all we have available for those fields. So when we think of suppression, before we actually look at the product, so while our developers are actually building this right now, I do have our UX and our prototypes that we're going to be able to go through. But when we suppress, what does that actually mean? So here's my original record type, Scott Winter, and all my information. I could have more phone numbers, like to have other email addresses, but in this case, I just have the one. Now, when we go through the suppression process, and you're going to see that we're going to have a couple safety guards in place to make sure you don't delete anything by accident, but we are completely severing you from everything in interaction. Now, I don't want to delete everything that was connected to me because maybe Maggie was on the activity, and even though I want to be forgotten, Maggie's not forgotten, and that activity is important for you guys to retain. So basically, we're severing the relationship between me and those activities, and then we're going to delete all the information about me except for my last name, the phone numbers, and also the email addresses. So those are going to get kept, and then we're taking it and we're encoding this information. So you're going to see the tool that we're doing this from, which is DataMinder, but there's not a folder that lives in the Windows client that you're going to be able to see that's called suppression. However, the SQL server allows this backdoor entrance to see all the data. You could potentially go to a suppression folder and somebody could take a look at this. So to help protect internal threats and help you, basically, if this is your interpretation, be compliant, we're encoding it so from the naked eye, I can't go anywhere in interaction. I can't see Winter, my phone number, my email address. You see this jumbled up mess of letters and numbers and characters. Now, even though these are jumbled up, we're still going to be able to do a cross-reference. So now, anytime Winter, that phone number, that email address come in and we make a match, we're going to not let the information into the system. So it's going to be blocked. And now, again, we're going to remember this while we're being deleted. You can't see any of the information. We're going to be able to block it if it comes in through any of those avenues that we were talking about on the last webinar. So Outlook, Windows Client, IQ, mobility, you name it. Now, what does this look like? So in early Q1 2017, I remember we're in the new date now, we released DataMinder. And DataMinder is the modernized kind of interface of where we're going with some administration, but also Windows client functionality. So data normalization was the first piece that came out. We had our new duplicate matching and detection that came out in October, and also has some merging capabilities. We now have contact control. And so now I'm going to go ahead and just click into this, and we're going to take a look at what this looks like in this prototype. Now, first off, contact control will need to be, actually, let me just go back one more step. Required fields, because I didn't have this for the last webinar, we'll show you what it looks like. So here's why I would go to my required fields. Last name is automatically checked. It's grayed out. You can't make any changes. And then now I can say any email address, any phone number is a required field. And this is where you can turn it on. And again, the main thing you want to think about with last name, email, and phone number is what helps me identify that this is a unique contact? What makes it unique? What fields? And how to identify that this is the right Winter, Scott.Winter at LexisNexis and 919 phone number? How to identify it's him and not somebody that's maybe in Europe or somebody else. Now with the settings, you need to turn on suppression. So you just have an easy green toggle switch on off, and then you get to pick what fields you want to suppress. So these are separate from the required fields. And again, the question you want to ask yourself is, what is it that makes a contact unique? That if this contact comes back into the system, I'm going to be able to catch it. So last name, email address, phone number, all three of these could be checked off. Maybe it's just last name and email. So if the new record comes in with the last name of Winter and the email Scott.Winter at LexisNexis, we're going to now block it because that matches someone in the suppression list. You have to have at least two, and you can go up to the three. Now, how this works. So Maggie Hepburn, she lets us know that she does no longer wants to be in our systems and wants to be forgotten. And actually, let's change it to Kara Love because she's the one who's in the system. So Kara Love is our senior UX engineer and or designer, and so Kara Love wants to be forgotten. So I go type in her last name, I put in her email address, and now this is going to show me, actually in this case, two Kara Love. So like Maggie has been preaching, the better your data is, the easier it is going to be to start to put some of these new processes in play. So potentially look at this and you wonder, you know, Carol Love, it's the same email address. You could go ahead and just suppress now. Maybe you want to go and do some research, clean up the data, and then do it. So these would be decisions you get to make. But the main thing we're looking at is last name. We're less concerned about the first name here. So last name and email address are the two fields that get suppressed. We don't keep the first name. Now, 2 contacts were found, but 4 are found in user contact lists. And so basically the 2 that were found here, these are on the firm list. The other 2 could be private contacts. These are the IACs if you get into the old school and still same school, new school interaction terminology. But this could be a contact that is in my Outlook and it's held private. Our methodology in the past is we wanted to have a mirror image of your contact list and your Outlook list, but keep some privacy. So if you had something private, we didn't want to show anybody an interaction. You can go into SQL in the back end and you can find this stuff, but from a front end, it's not possible to see these things. And this is going to kind of just to pause off the functionality. I have a poll question, and I'm going to have a screen after this that you guys can email myself and John, who's the lead product manager for GDPR. But we're curious to know, everyone on the phone and doing some market research here, how concerned you would be about privacy and if these users should be shown. And because what happens now is when I suppress and delete this contact, because we're connected to that My Contact that connects to your Outlook sync, we're going to delete the contact in Outlook on the next Outlook syncing process. If you have that syncing every 5 minutes, if I hit suppress, within 5 minutes, that Outlook is going to be out of that person's email now, or out of their Outlook. Now, some firms see that as a good thing because Exchange can be interpreted as a system that you need to control. And if I want to be forgotten, you need to take them out of the Exchange system. So deleting that contact to some firms is a very, very good thing. Now, the other firms, you might think that I don't want to delete a contact from one of the lawyers' lists, and I don't interpret it that way, and I don't want that to happen. So there's an idea here of how we want to display this information to you and how to get to that lawyer to let them know that we need to move that contact to a different folder. That way it doesn't sync up with interaction. So the question would be, you know, if I showed the lawyer or the professional, for anyone that's in non-legal on the phone, if I showed their names here, then you could send IT and go work with them to fix that. And also let them know, hey, this contact wants to be forgotten. It's good information to talk about and again, have a good process in play. But does that create any type of privacy concerns? So that's why I want you guys to come back to me on that. So now I have Cara Love. We have 4 required fields, requested by, how the request was made. So was it a phone call, was it an email, was it something else? The date that the request took place, and then the reason why. And now when I'm finished and I'm good here, I hit suppress the contact. And again, we give you that second screen. Are you really sure you want to do this? Because once this data is deleted, it is gone for good because we want to keep you in compliance. You can't bring it back. So you actually have to type in yes, which is consistent with the rest of the interaction. And then you hit confirm. And now Cara has been suppressed, her data has been deleted, and she's been severed from any activities that she was connected to. Now, times can change. Cara gets a change of heart. Something can happen, and now she wants to be back in our system. Maybe she's a client again. There was a brief, a couple years where she wasn't working with us. Now she's a client. She wants to be, she gives us consent. We want to bring her back into the system. So now what I can do here is I would search for Love, put in her email address, and, oh, I'm sorry, got to go to reinstate. So you go to the reinstate tab, put in Cara, put in her email address. And so now here's Love. And so this is a prototype, so you actually won't see the first name. We have Love. We have the email address. If you were suppressing the phone number, which you got to pick, you would see the phone number, who this request is by, the reason that we are removing her from the suppression, and I can go ahead and hit remove. And then I can type in yes and hit confirm. And then Cara will now be unblocked from the system. So all we're doing here is now saying Love and that email address, that phone number are no longer in the suppression list. So when information now comes back in, it's not going to be blocked because there's not that cross-reference, nothing to cross-reference it against. So the last step here is you actually need to create the contact. So by unsuppressing, we're not creating a new contact. You would still need to go to Outlook or go into Interaction and create the new contact. And again, we're not reassigning to any of the existing tasks or activities and interactions that happened in the past. We don't know what they are anymore because we severed all those ties. The Kara basically is a brand new contact at this point, and then we can continue to work with Kara. Now, you can go do your association cleanup and get her attached to the company, and there's the tools in place to kind of help this along, but we're not going to be able to bring back any of that history. So this is Data Minder. This is going to be the suppression part of the March 30th release. Let me go back to the slide deck here. Again, here's the poll question because I want to make sure that we tackle this right. Is it a privacy concern to see a professional's private contact when suppressing? And think about this, and then go ahead and email John Burns at LexisNexis.com, and then myself, Scott.Winter at LexisNexis.com as well. And then we'll, take all this into, how we want to address that for this March 30th release. Again, target date, March 30th, and I'll go back while I'm saying this. So we're starting to get there. The time is really flying. It's hard to believe we're in 2018 already, but we're looking good. Again, I'm trying to be as transparent as possible through every one of these calls. Everything is green on the project now, so nothing is looking like we're going to not be at that date. But again, anything can come up, but it is still a target date. But again, things are looking good. So I'll hand it over to Dave here for a second. He's going to go through some reminders, and his number one reminder will be the next webinar is on February 8th, and that's, I believe it's a Friday, and that's where we're going to be covering the protection piece of this, so things that we're doing around protection. The hint about that is we'll have the SQL server. On SQL, we're going to have the suppression folder encoded, and that's for internal threats. For external threats, you still are going to think about some encryption methods. And so we'll talk about how we're going to give you the ability to encrypt interaction if you choose to do so in your on-premise environment. So, Dave, to you.
Well, thank you, Scott and Maggie, for your very informative session. As a reminder, if you do have any questions, feel free to ask them via the questions pane located on your webinar control panel. Before we start with our Q&A, I do have a few reminders to our listeners today. First, as Interaction customers, you have access to webinars, newsletters, tip videos, product updates, and more. Our Interact with Interaction program is designed to help you optimize how your firm uses Interaction. And don't forget to update your communication preferences to receive these ongoing valuable resources. Also, if you aren't a member of the Interaction CRM LinkedIn group, join today for best practice sharing and continual updates on what's happening in the Interaction world. You'll find links to update your communication preferences and to join the LinkedIn group in the presentation slides provided to you after this webinar. We had a very interesting and relevant topic today, and there's a lot of questions coming in. Scott and Maggie, if you're ready, I'll get the first question to you.
All right. We'll figure out who to pass it to.
Okay, I'll let you decide that. First question is, wonder if the person who wanted to be forgotten wants to renew the business relationship. How will that work?
Yep, and so that is the reinstate. So you're speaking with the person, and we realize that they need to be back in Interaction. We want to start marketing. They'll maybe move from Interaction to your ERP system. But at that point, you would go to reinstate, put in their last name and email address and phone number if you're using the phone number field, or last name and phone number only. And you would hit reinstate. Then that's going to be blocked, and then we can enter them back in the system.
Okay, another question. Is the new suppression process a feature of the upcoming version of Interaction, March 31st? How can this be implemented? Or is Data Minder required in order to implement this?
Good question. So data minder is required. That's where the technology is being built into. Now, this is all included with your M&S that you guys pay every year. So you're entitled to all the new upgrades. So this is, you do need to have data minder. This is part of the March 30th release. Right now, depending on what version you're on, so data minder came out, again, it's been about 13, 14 months. So I guess that's about two releases ago. So the first thing would be if you're still maybe 6.1 or earlier version 6.2, you could go ahead and implement that version of 6.2 with data minder now. And then when the March 30th release comes out, the areas that we've been touching are fewer. So your regression testing and how much time you spend in your dev environment before you go into your production should be a lot less if you have that earlier version of data minder and the earlier version of 6.2 from last year in place already. But you do need data minder to have the suppression technology. And to add to that, just future roadmap stuff, data minder is going to be getting more things in the future. So data minder is a major part of our modernization strategy, and you'll see more Windows client coming into data minder. So you definitely want to get there if you're not there already.
Next question deals with suppression, contact control. Do you have to go contact by contact, or can you select multiple contacts?
Yeah, at this point, it is contact by contact. This is going to be a very agile approach. This is the first release of it. I don't expect it to be the last release touching GDPR. As the regulation is being enforced, as firms learn more about it, we're probably going to be learning more things to make this more and to improve it. But to start with, just to be careful, we want to go contact by contact, and you have to type in the yes and make sure that you want to delete it. And because it's such a severe change in your data, where you're never going to get it back, it's cutting all ties, I wanted to take the first release and be very cautious around it. Also, kind of I mentioned in the beginning, I don't know what we're going to see here. I don't know if we're going to have a handful of contacts per firm that's going to be forgotten, if we're going to see a lot, if we're going to see any. So these are just some questions that we're going to be paying very close attention to. And I already have on our roadmap for later this summer. We have some time kind of set aside, a certain percentage of our resources to be able to continue to enhance GDPR if necessary.
Okay, great. We have another question here. What happens if the person has left Lexis and gone to another company? How would you know the person wanted to be forgotten?
Yeah, so this is kind of another thing I was working with the team earlier that we're going through our test cases and keep our eyes on. You might say that in this case, the mobile phone number, so last name and mobile phone over email address would be what you're looking for. And because we want to make a match on all three or all two for the contact be allowed back in automatically. If it matches one out of three, it's still going to come into the system. And that's even some of the calls we've had as we've been validating this, you worry about all the Smiths. And every time you have a Smith that matches the last name, if it's just the one of the three that matches, and you're getting tickets and or alerts in some case, if that's how the technology was working, that they thought that would be overburdening on their staff to see that many tickets. So right now, again, what is it that makes a contact unique? Is it last name? Is it mobile phone number? Because it would be any one of the phone numbers that could come in that make a match. It could be any one of the email addresses. And again, this is going to be something that we'll continue to pay attention to. And if we see any kind of questions around this in the market or a needed enhancement, that's something we'll look into. And again, is there another way that we could still have a high level of certainty that it is the same person, but not be too harsh in some ways or not miss things where things need to be caught.
Next question. If we configure suppression to remove the contact from the user's Outlook contacts, can the suppression process be configured to send the user an email explaining to them that the contact was removed and why?
Yeah, that's actually part of what we're looking at with that question. So is it, and part of the poll question. So if you want to email John and myself, let us know, would you do it afterward? Would you do it before? Would you show their name? Again, the privacy, what kind of security controls do I need to have in place to make sure for a firm that thinks it's a privacy issue that they can block it, but a firm that doesn't, they might have the different feature. But yeah, we are looking at, because you have some of that ability today in the web client, where if there's an anonymous relationship, you can hit the link and it sends them an email. Could we do something like that? And we're investigating that as well. So please, send us an email and let us know your thoughts on, is it a privacy concern, and maybe what would work best in your environment to solve for that.
Okay, next question, Scott. Dealing with suppression, does the suppression process remove all information, including folder links, or should this be done manually before suppression?
So we are deleting every tie. I've talked about activities and other interactions. Dave has the name of who asked this. I want to just double check and see. I think we're taking it out of that folder, so it's just deleted from everyone in the system, so it's not going to have any tie to the folder. Basically, that name no longer exists anywhere in the system except for the suppression folder, which would take away that tie. But let me just check with the dev team and confirm that. I'm pretty comfortable with that answer. Actually, they're texting me right now with what that answer is, so I'll go ahead and read that while I get the next question. Yep,
okay,
we're
next
deleting
question.
everything. So it does delete that tie. So that tie is gone.
Okay, next question. Instead of reinstating a contact through DataMinder, what happens if they RSVP for an event through Vuture?
So they RSVP for an event. Vuture, is it coming in and creating a new contact? Vuture is just putting that name into a folder. Let me think through that process a little bit. So if we're not creating a new contact, like what we're looking for in our in the app server is a new contact entry. So if that new contact would try to come in, we would block it from Vuture, and it would not get into the system. Now, if it's a name, actually the question is, how did you get the RSVP out to the contact if the contact was deleted and if you're sending that list to Vuture? So I'm thinking is even if you did a manual entry into Vuture, that would not make it through the API, and it would be, I don't know what the technical term here, some sort of orphan contact in a way. It just wouldn't get into interaction. But I think I go back to the first part of the question, how would they have gotten the invitation if they were deleted from the system and took away consent and were not getting any marketing?
Next question. Wonder if the contact has a common name and changes company. How would the system know that they were suppressed in the past?
So the common name, and this is part of the thing that we, again, will continue to evaluate and can this get better? And again, we're going to learn from more of the interpretations and what you guys think out there. But so let's say you have Smith and Smith at Facebook.com and the mobile number 919XYZ. So now I go to Apple, or Smith does, not Smith at Apple, maybe it's the same phone number. So we've been talking about, should we match against, instead of having all three, should we at some point be able to just match on two out of the three, a higher maybe instance of it, and then maybe let you know that this is potentially somebody that is suppressed. So this is getting into one of the enhancements we're already knowing about, or already thinking about, with kind of more of an alert that there should be something from the user interface. Again, we're doing a lot of this through the app server today, just to try to get this out by March 30th for everybody. So we will, again, continue to look at that. But yeah, a Smith with a different email address and a different phone number, there's still a Smith. So, should I alert you on every time a Smith comes in? We're still evaluating some of that process and what is the right way to effectively solve for it. And then a lot of this just gets into some of the nuances with GDPR, because you want to let people in and use your CRM system, and how much is too much and how much is maybe a little bit too little. So happy if you send me some emails around what your thoughts and what your kind of thought or view is on that. I'd be happy to actually talk to you offline a little bit more and continue to, again, evolve this and make it stronger as we can in the future, or as much as we can in the future.
Okay, next question. Does the interaction new contact process check to see if a contact has been suppressed, and does it alert the user that the contact cannot be created because it has been suppressed?
Yeah, not at this point. That is kind of that next enhancement. Almost what I just talked about a second. You guys really do good with making your questions right in line. So from the first webinar, you have it's about eight or nine points of entry in different applications that contacts can come into the system. And going and touching each one of those in a limited time frame was not the most effective way to have the best solution out there for you. They could have a blocking of contacts, required field suppression, the encryption, everything that we're building in a couple months here. So at this point, you would, if you did go in and go through the new contact entry and interaction, it would, when it's saved, it's going to hit the app server and it's going to get blocked at that point. If you put it in through your Outlook, it's going to try to sync up. It's going to get blocked through the interaction sync, and then the next time the sync process takes place, I think that's where that's going to get deleted. And we're planning a release that would probably be around the summertime right now. I'm still putting together our release cycle, but we are looking at a more proactive approach to GDPR that is going to show you at the point of entry in some way that this contact is a suppressed contact. But that is something that will come as a later enhancement to what we have today.
Okay, next question. Since each firm decides how they will interpret GDPR, is there an option that gives us flexibility to enable or disable contact deletion from Outlook when a contact is suppressed? Is such an option being considered for the future?
Yeah, so that is getting into our Outlook sync, and Outlook sync has been out for quite some time now. So we've been talking about what type of development does that open? What type of time frame does that open? So ideally, that's probably where I'd want to be. And right now, building in small steps, and also just seeing how often this is going to happen. So if you're seeing that you're getting, hundreds of suppressions a year, definitely I would say let's put a lot more of our resources, if you think of everything that CRM can do for you, around GDPR and make that just a killer GDPR system. Now, if you're getting one a year, and out of our 500 plus clients, it's very similar. If I could give you a workflow that you have something that pops up, a report, it tells you who that lawyer is, then we can go approach that in a different way, and I can put more emphasis around other parts of the system that you're using, 50+% of the time. So, but that is in the Outlook sync. It's definitely something that we're reviewing. And as we continue to modernize the product, and you can see DataMinders, the newer tool that is updating some of the tools that you have in the Windows client. For those of you that have IQ, it's doing merging and duplicate detection. That will be coming out to the rest of our core clients later this year. So you'll all have that duplicate technology with machine learning in place. But that is kind of where that touches, and we will be looking to update some of the Outlook syncing in the future at some point.
Next question. Will future preference forms trigger the reinstatement process?
So I have some scheduled meetings with our friends at our different e-marketing companies that we work with to talk about that. So the preference, if it would come in and if it doesn't find the contact to change a preference to, I'm thinking through the API, it would probably get thrown away at that point. If it was a new contact, so you're trying to get the new contact created, which it can work from the web methods, that would hit the app server, because the app server is really driving all this, and that contact would get blocked. And again, what are some ways in the future that we could maybe alert you of that? But even when Vutur's sending this stuff to us, if the contact's been suppressed, nothing's going to be able to touch that contact. But just to kind of add to that, I'm looking to have our friends join us in another webinar around how e-marketing and interaction can affect you guys. So this is something that I'll be talking to them a little bit more on just what their APIs look like. It's been a while since I was looking at anything like that for them. And so again, Dave has this question, so I'll put this as a task, so I'll follow up. And maybe this could even come out in one of our newsletters. So our marketing people at Lexus on the call, we might follow up with how is the suppression technology going to work with third-party e-marketing solutions.
Okay, great. As we're winding down here, we have one of our last questions. How will reinstate process work with website sign-up preferences forms? How will it work for a suppressed contact coming back and signing up at a later date?
And I just have to say, this is unfair. I don't think Maggie has gotten one question. I think,
it's okay.
So right now through, again, the app servers, which drives all of our technology, and this is where we have the block in place. So if you are connected to your website, which is awesome that you do that, kudos there, it's not going to make its way into interaction. Now, if a contact is coming through your website and asking to be on a list, could that be interpreted as them giving you consent again? So I think that is where, as we look to enhance this after March 30th, I think it's May 30th earlier, so it's March 30th. This will get into some of that proactive notification that we're thinking of. And so just like if I put it in through a new contact in through somewhere in interaction, it would say, hey, this contact is suppressed. Would it make sense from a website workflow that you get alerted as a report somehow, or some sort of alert notification that somebody tried to get their preferences to you, or sign up for a newsletter, but they've been suppressed? And could I give that to you in some sort of notification format that you can then reach out to them and identify, hey, I know you took away consent earlier, you wanted to be forgotten. Let's talk about what you want to do now. Are you now giving us consent? And what would be the best workflow to do that? So again, coming May 25th, when you're actually going to be probably turning on the suppression, again, how often are people taking away and wanting to be forgotten? So we are, again, I think this is a great notification. I know John and the rest of the team are on the call for this. So we'll take this use case and kind of think about how we can enhance this with our resource allotment this summer to add to the value of what you're going to get with what's coming on March 30th. But that is a great use case.
Okay, we've got probably another minute. Maggie, I want to squeeze a question in your direction. Can you remind us what happens to a contact on the front end when it is archived?
Thank you for that question, whoever asked that. Yay, I get to answer one. That's a great question. On the back end, when you archive one, obviously what happens is you're moving it to another folder. It's becoming non-visible. And we did have some enhancements recently that basically from the front end, what that's going to do is break that connection from the front end and your user's version of that contact. So it won't appear as a shared contact anymore. It will become a personal contact on the front end. So in that sense, if you think about it, if they try to put it in a list going forward, they won't be able to. They'll have to share the contact specifically. But that's when you receive it on the back end from a data quality perspective, and you can compare it to your archive list periodically, make sure that there's a reason why that contact was archived, or as I like to say, bring it, hey, now it's relevant again, maybe bring it back into the mix, right? So yeah, break that connection, but obviously it's still in play. You've just archived it away because of its current relevance or lack thereof.
Okay, great. Well, that brings us to the end. That concludes our webinar for today, and I would like to thank Scott and Maggie once again for their excellent presentation, and to all of our attendees for taking time out of your busy day to join us. Just a few quick follow-up reminders. All attendees will receive an email within 1 week with a link to a recording of today's webinar and slides. In closing, there was a brief survey at the end of our webinar today that we ask you to please take a moment to complete. Your feedback will help us in planning our future webinars. Thank you all again for your time today, and we hope everyone has a great afternoon.